In this video, we compare the interface and integrations for the three LMSs.
Channel 1 is where we're going to start, and on the notes page is where I have an outline of some of the things that we're going to talk about. I'll try to hit all of them, but we'll look at the interfaces, so just kind of get your eyes on what things look like. We'll move through alphabetically through Brightspace and Canvas and then Schoology, trying to show in parallel what things look like. I'll try to bring out comparisons as I can, and then we'll go back through looking at parallels again in the next for the next thing. If you have any questions, we'll try to answer them. We'll do the best we can. So all right, so let's get started. So the first one we're going to look at here is Brightspace. This is the landing page or the dashboard, as some people refer to it. So when you sign in, it will be the first page that you see. However, the way the page is laid out, in Brightspace, it's laid out based on what they call widgets. So widgets are kind of like the content blocks that we had in PowerSchool, where you could select, okay, this one's going to be for content, this one's going to be links, this one's going to be something else. But in Brightspace, the widgets are similar, but they're still different. So, for example, on this landing page, it has my courses as the first widget. I can do some things to customize it, but not a whole lot. This will probably end up being something decided on by administration or by a small group, what will end up being on this dashboard. But it is possible to do some editing of this page. And I'll just show you what some of the different types might be. So this is the widget based, as I mentioned. You can also use a tool which is, we won't go into that at this point, or you can set it to an external URL, so like if you had a web page elsewhere, then you can set it to come here. There's some different layouts. So similar to PowerSchool, where you can kind of decide what your blocks are going to look like, but I think some more flexibility there. And then down here is where you can add or move the widgets around. So as you saw on that first page, the calendar was on the right, but if I wanted to move it, I can move it over to this column and bookmarks here. Oops, sorry. I wanted to show you some more of the widgets here in a second. Widgets are different depending on whether a student or a teacher is seeing it, and we'll see this more when we look at course homepages. But you'll see some of the options. You can have an activity feed, you can have your administrative tools, and a variety of other things that will be set on that landing page however you want them to be or however the school decides them to be. The same thing when it comes to course homepage, you'll have those same options, but we'll look at that in a minute. So that is the basic landing page. You can change the banner, change the image. This menu up top is customizable, and that'll be sort of based on the organization too. It can be different between different divisions. And then the nav, like I just mentioned, the navbar is editable. So now let's look at the dashboard for Canvas. So similarly, we have tiles, again, for the courses. Our menu is along the left. And then on the right side, I think this is the default, and I don't know that this can be changed. It's kind of a coming up of what events you have coming up. And then this is, you could have the option to start a new course. As far as customizing it, you can change the colors of the tiles. You can drag and drop them to change the location. And then here, you have the option to have a list view or the cards. The list is really, I guess I can show it to you, but it's really kind of busy. So not so great. Oops. And that's where I usually, there we go, get back to card view. And that's it. It's pretty straightforward as far as that dashboard or landing page is concerned. Schoology, another similar layout with the default being the course dashboard, which gives you the tiles. These can't really be customized at all, those tiles. You do have reminders over here, and again, the upcoming, with a menu across the top. So now we'll take a look at the account settings. So going back to Brightspace, you'll find the account settings under your name. And pretty straightforward, not so super exciting about formatting. You also have options for discussions, and you can choose your settings there about like whether the posts are going to reply or whatever, what your email is going to be. So not a whole lot going there. These are just the global account settings for the whole thing. Similarly, in Canvas, we've got settings under your account, this time on the left side. In Canvas, this is where you connect your Google Drive. Talks a little bit about some integrations. We'll talk very briefly about that. And then you have a number of things that you can kind of choose the way you want them, if you want them to show up or not. Some of them are accessibility based, like the high contrast UI or the immersive reader. That's about it. Schoology. We've got settings over here, again, under your account. The big difference here, besides the generic account settings, is that in Schoology, there's just one place here where you activate the iCalendar link. So each of these platforms has its own built-in calendar where all the information about all of your classes come into one calendar. In Schoology, there is one link that grabs everything from all of your calendars, and when you enable that link, like this one is, you copy it, then you can add it to your Outlook as a web calendar. All three platforms have this ability, but in Schoology it's just one link. In the others, you can select exactly which calendars you want to send through. So that's just a difference there. The other difference here in Schoology is this is where you can set your homepage options either to recent activity or course dashboard. Course dashboard is that sleeker summary as opposed to this whole list of everything that's happening. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the home pages on each platform, and we'll start again with Brightspace, and then we're going to go into the course homepage, and that's where you likely will have a little more flexibility on what you want that to look like. So we're going to go into Physics 11, and it's familiar again with that widget setup. Again, in this case, we have the long and the short, but we have those different layout variations that we could choose. I have the content browser set up here as one of the widgets, which would allow you to click through and go straight into the content from that page. The other way to get there would be to go from this menu. This menu up top is customizable and is expandable. This particular one is set up with just the words, but if we looked at a different class, like grade 2, just to show you a stark example, you can see that navbar is set up with icons. So you have an option to deciding how quote-unquote friendly you want your navbar to be, but you have some options there with customizing it.
And
Yes.
Just when you say you mean the teacher, not the student.
I mean the teacher,
Okay.
yes. So this, you also have the option, let me go back to this. So here's again where you're editing the way you want your page to look. And I think that's it for this one. Yeah, because we didn't want to change it to something else. So you have your different panels, okay. Let's look at the dashboard in Canvas, and we'll look at biology. So you notice this looks really different. So in Canvas, what you see over here as home in the list for just the course is set as a specific home page. So this kind of looks like a web page, and it's basically put together that way using a rich text editor. So the teacher in this case created this page under Pages and then decided to choose it to be the home page. So you have the option of having, again, that activity stream. You could have it go straight to the course modules, which is content, and we'll talk about that a little bit more too, but you can have it just go straight to content. I'll show you what that looks like. So when the student goes to your course page, they would just go straight to, this is your organization of your content, rather than going to a home page. Or the assignments list. Should look like this. Or something else. Syllabus. So I'm going to put it back where it was. but you do have that flexibility there. In contrast, in Brightspace, you do have the option of having the content browser there if you want to have a quick access, but you can also put your announcements or what have you in. You can also customize a widget specifically to put into it what you want to put into it. I'm not going to show you that process, but you could take a video, put that into a widget, have that video be there. The text, whatever you want, you can have that there too. Schoology, let's click into world history. So, little different here. So in Schoology, where you're landing is that materials or content view. So similar to the way it was when I just showed you in Canvas, how you could get that hierarchical structure of all the content, that's where you're landing here when you're in Schoology. So this, for example, is your Unit 1. This is where you would be organizing your content, and this is also where your course lands, the landing page for it. Now, in this particular case, they just put a video up top. But I'm going to show you another example in my test course, where I made it sort of trying to make it look a little bit more like what a page would look like if someone landed there. So I created a page, is here you can, actually not there, sorry. You can say I'm gonna add a page. And then I created this page just using the rich text editor, which all of these have, so there's no more of that crazy pasting and having stuff go everywhere and look funny. Now it's just all viewable, however you want. Headings, blah, blah, blah. So I created this page, I put the links in, and I chose, I should show you, in Schoology you have this option to display the page or the information inline, which means you have the whole thing showing there like how I had it, or if I undid that, you say it wouldn't show there. So the landing is just right on the content. But if you want it to have something more like a page, then you can say that you can display it inline. Like that. Okay, so those are the three things basically what I wanted to show you about home pages, and we'll look more at the rich context editor and things like that, content editor, but I wanted you to see across what that landing page will look like. It looks essentially the same for students. We'll look at a student view a little bit later so you can see. The biggest difference, I think, is going to be between what is seen in Brightspace when the student clicks in. Content, what the student sees when they click into Brightspace versus other places. But we're going to look at the content now. And so this is the content area for Brightspace, which looks similar to that content area in Canvas, which we'll look at again. But it's set up in sort of this module organization where you have your quote-unquote module and then whatever you want underneath it. It can be a sub-module, a unit. It can be a page. So for example, this here is a page like those other pages looked in Canvas, and like that quote-unquote page looked like in Schoology. But when you click here and then you click on each thing in the content, you can see rich text editing. This is actually an HTML template, so there are templates that can be preset, maybe for departments or something to that effect, where you can just grab a template and create a new piece of content. But as you click through, content will show up, and then if it's something else, in this case a checklist or a self-assessment or any other kind of discussion or an assignment, then it gives you the link to go straight to that assignment. So it doesn't put it in here, but it tells you where to go. But you can find it by just going to the content page and looking for what you need. In Canvas, I'm going to go to modules because that's the analogous thing in Canvas. And then again, we see a similar hierarchical structure here with my module and then my units or assignments underneath. The big difference here is when I click on this, I don't see to the right panel what it is. I have to click through. And so now this took me through to this content. And then I just go back to the hierarchical structure. And then the different icons will help you to see what the differences are. I haven't fully memorized them yet. Like, I'm not sure the rocket, one might be a quiz and one might be a homework or something like that. But you can see how it's laid out. So you can do this ahead of time and choose what you would, and we'll talk more about publishing information later too, but so you choose how to publish that. But that's the basic structure for content in Canvas. Hopping back over to Schoology, we saw a peek at this before, but we have this similar structure where you can have folders that are units. You can have a page like this one that just shows, I embedded a Google Doc in there just to show you. So the entire page that I created is showing because I remember I had said I wanted to have it display in line. And for students to go through the content, then they would, again, they need to click through, so it's not going to show up in that stream unless I say every single thing is going to be in line. And still then not everything shows. We'll need to click through. So let's click through this assignment. Then it'll take me to the assignment, and then I'll have to go into the document. Okay, yes?
Can I ask a question? So with the Schoology one, can you, if you have it showing in line, by the end of the year is everything on the page, do you know what I mean? Or are there like subfolders that like you can break out?
They can, there are you can create them as subfolders, but the bummer thing is that when you go to add a new material, I think it always adds it at the bottom.
Okay.
So then you gotta drag it all the way up. Yeah, and so that's one reason to make the hierarchy so that at least you could have all of the folders collapsed. But yeah, it's kind of like a stream like that. Okay, so I want to talk about publishing content and the differences in how you publish it. So I think in PowerSchool we have the option to, you publish now or you can publish later and put the date in. And I think that's pretty much it. Is that all we can do in PowerSchool? Yeah. So if we go to Brightspace, I'm going to look at creating something new in the, actually let me go down to something. I'm going to go to my test course actually. Which is Build Your Course. Okay, so again, I set mine up like I wanted it to look like a landing page so they can immediately see this is what we're talking about, Conyers. And with the rich text editor that I want to emphasize because it's so much better, you can change your fonts, change your colors. You've got embed capabilities. You can insert stuff from other places. We have STEM editors available, tables, etc. Somewhere there's a link to, oh, this is actually an interesting, built into Brightspace are some accessibility checks. And so I don't know if you noticed during the presentation this morning, there was white type on top of light blue. I could barely see half of the stuff that was up top. That would have been caught by Brightspace because as I did here, I used this light green over white. It's telling me, hey, you need a higher contrast ratio for it to really be accessible to everyone to see well. So that's one of the kind of student-centered support features in here. You also can, there are some native video, I'm trying to find where that is on the menu, I don't remember where it is now. But it has a native video recorder where you can, I think it's under insert stuff. You can insert a video, yeah, you can insert a video link. So it will open up your camera and you can video right now and it'll go right in. So it's a name, we just call it a native video, something that will take video natively. And again, your tables, et cetera, you can pop in. And then a Google Doc is this, what I've embedded. So to publish this, the first option you have is called availability days. Pretty straightforward. When you want it to start showing and you have an endpoint where you want it to go away. So that kind of speaks a little bit to your point, Karen, where you can say, okay, now we're done with this, so it doesn't have to scroll all the way down to the bottom. Once you have closed that down, you have a bunch more options available to you from this menu, and it says View Release Conditions. conditions. And so release conditions are going to be conditions under which this content should be made visible to students. So you can create all kinds of release conditions, and this just opens up so many possibilities. And each of these systems has some sort of release condition. I think these are the most extensive, as you'll see as we compare them. So if you select a condition type, I can say, okay, I actually created a checklist, which I'll show you. So I'm going to say that I want to have a particular item on my checklist completed before the next module opens up. So I would select that, then I would go and select whatever the checklist was that I made, and then I would select a specific item. And then I would save that, but I'm not going to because I have some other ones saved. But that would then make it imperative for a student to, and Brightspace checklist is unique to Brightspace, where you can set up the events or the tasks that you want the student to complete over whatever period of time. You can set it up and outline each of these pieces into a checklist. You can set due dates if you like. So I have, I want them to read this, it's due here, then I want them to read this, I want them to read this. So I can set up my release condition to say, this particular piece of content won't open up until you've read the introduction. Once you've done that and checked it off, you're acknowledging that you did it, then you can go ahead and read different types of modules. So you can set up this learning path for students, and it keeps and it's just releasing it incrementally, so they're not overwhelmed by seeing 100 modules.
Can you tie that to scores on quizzes?
Yes. Let me show you. Just go back to look at other release conditions. Cancel. Okay. So other condition types, and this is it's such a long list. It's actually pretty impressive, but you can decide based on assignments. You receive a certain score on a rubric. You have submitted to a folder. You've received submission. Scrolling down, particular competencies. If you've achieved this competency, you can move on. You've scored on a rubric. You've visited a content topic. You've done something in a discussion, and then here's grades. You got a particular grade value. You got a score on a rubric. You didn't get a grade. The final grade score was released. And then quizzes. Scores on quizzes. Completed at least one attempt. Scored on specific questions on this quiz. So if you scored 1 out of 5 on this quiz, then this module opens up so that you can review that and then go back and take the quiz again, for example. But if you scored higher on that, then you don't have to deal with that worksheet, whatever. And then the same with surveys. So there are a lot of possibilities there. And then once you choose one and you go into the condition type, you have even more options to be more granular if you want. So obviously you don't have to use it, but it's there if there's an occasion for it. In Canvas, let me get my bearings back here. So I think I need to go to my test course, which is test course. Okay. So I've got my content, my page, that's my home. I'm going to go to modules. Again, that shows the content here in its hierarchical setup. When I go to the module, I go to edit. And here's where I can set up what they call completion requirements or completion rules. So here I can select that the student must, they've completed one of these assignments before they can move on to the next thing. So I just picked these two. And we're going to look at this from the student perspective a little bit later, so you'll see what it looks like when they haven't completed something and then when they have. So I have two things that they have completed both of these things before the module is going to be available to them. I don't think that's available on, so the interesting thing about, just popping back to Brightspace, is that you can create release conditions for various for almost every different kind of content that you put into your content page. In Canvas, I think you're limited just to the module node. So module will open up with everything underneath it. Whereas in Brightspace, you can set up going from this quiz to that piece of content, or from this score to that piece of content. So you have a little more granularity with how you set that up. Schoology, they are called student, let's see here. These are the student completion rules, but I have to remember where exactly they are. At the unit level. So there's a difference as well. So here for this particular piece of content, I don't have the option to set the release conditions for this page showing up. I can only set release conditions at the unit level or at the folder level, which is here. So here you can see there's this student completion. When I click on that, then I get the options to set up requirements. So, yeah, for lesson 1, in order to, they have to have completed it in order to move on. Okay, not super granular in terms of scores, but you can set up a sequence or not. But that's how you could determine when things are. It's kind of like when they're published, but when they're available to students. So again, main differences are Brightspace, lots of different kinds of release conditions, can be used on lots of different pieces of content. In Canvas and in Schoology, more restricted on how that can be used at the module level or the unit level. Okay, what's my next thing? Oh, I wanted to look at the settings also for the courses. So for course settings, when you're in the course, then, here we go, sorry. Course administration allows you, you're obviously administrating your course, so let's just go there. So here you have options. We talked about home pages before and widgets, but here's where you could sort of change up where you want your home page to be. And then you have lots of different things that you can set up here. You can create groups. You can look at the class progress. Here's going straight to content. You can manage files that you can upload into the system. External tools, dates. So this would be your administrative place, and then you can go directly to some of these things like standards that weren't in your nav bar, that you didn't want to have in your nav bar. So standards, for example, I thought I had put them in here, but apparently I didn't, so we'll just ignore that. In Canvas, actually not there, you go into your administration here. Let's cut off at the bottom, sorry. Under settings, these are kind of boring ones. They're just kind of the technical, your date. But then you also have options up here where you can create sections. All 3 systems allow you to have sections. My understanding is that because each of them interfaces with Veracross, that will be pre-sent into the system for you. So when you start, which is no more adding manually kids in. So anywhere we land, you'll end up with like a course shell, we call it, that's already in there. Your students already in there. If they withdraw, they'll be pulled out. If they get added, they'll be put in. So you don't have to deal with that roster anymore. And sectioning will also happen in there as well. So you won't have to worry about doing any of that manually. You can choose what items you want to appear on the menu for the students. The same is true across all 3 platforms. And then there are what we refer to as LTI, or external tools. And these are tools that have worked out within the framework of a particular framework that LTI refers to, that they can operate with each other. So Canvas will say, if you give me this key and this password, then we'll work together and you'll be able to create assignments in this external tool without leaving Canvas. So one example that I worked with was Flipgrid. They have that kind of agreement with Canvas. Edpuzzle does with, I think, Brightspace. So there are different ones that have different levels of interoperability, but that's what external tool refer to. That includes Google Assignments / Classroom, which we'll look at too when we look at assignments, but you're able to make assignments for Google Classroom, or we'll call it Google Assignments because that's the technical, where you're making that copy, it distributes to everybody, they work on it, they turn it back in. That's what apps refers to when we talk about external apps. And then integrations we'll talk about a little bit later. But those are your course settings there. And then here we've got course settings here. Different look, I don't know why it pops you right on the privacy settings. All of these will include some kind of notification settings that you can customize for how often and what you want to hear about. They all have, again, some interface for external tools. You'll see here, we have the Google Drive assignments. We will talk about SCORM. So, some basic customability. I would say overall, I feel like the course customability features in Brightspace are more than in Schoology, and Canvas has a pretty good setup too. So Schoology seems to be a little narrow in terms of how much you can customize it. Okay, let's see where I am. Sticky. Okay, so integrations. I think that's where I am. Yeah. So, let me go back to the team. Because I'm going to show you a few things to make sure I've done everything. Actually, why don't we go ahead, let's look at student view first before we talk about the integrations. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to my students here. Now we'll go through landing page. So Brightspace looks familiar because it's pretty much exactly what you saw on the teacher side, except just the student page. Landing page in Canvas for the student. Let's go back in. Pretty much the same again, except they have their to-do list along the right column, and then their recent feedback. Schoology landing page. Again, the same, except they have overdue listed up top as well as upcoming. When you go into the course page, here's where you're going to find a major difference. So you remember how it looked for the teacher in Brightspace. Let's just take a quick peek back. Okay, so there's a teacher view in Build Your Content. In the student view, they'll get, it's kind of a reminder up here of like the latest thing that's been published. So this is telling them like this is your current assignment that you need to do. And then underneath is the module, but it's not set up in that hierarchical way that we saw for the teacher. It's actually set up as kind of this package. I think it's more geared towards like online classes where you're not having that in-class experience, so that you would actually launch the unit as a student. And then it's presented to you kind of like a presentation. So we had that first page. Everything is isolated, no other extraneous things on the outside. So I can deal with that content. I move on to the next content, which was that checklist. If you remember, as a teacher, I put that in there because I wanted the students to know what they needed to do. So we're going to uncheck these. Now remember that we have release conditions set for some of this content based on completing the checklist. So I've unchecked everything, so I have 0%, but I'm going to try to move on anyway. I get this content because it was just the next page. These aren't exactly my birds, but I have birds just like them. They're so cute. Which one was the one? Oops. It is, of course, not working the way it's supposed to. I might have to sign out and sign back in. What you would see if this were going according to plan is that since I hadn't checked this off, I would not actually be able to move on to the next content. And sorry for that. Not sure why it's not cooperating. But again, what you see is the major difference here as we student now, I'm seeing all of these options along the side. I have to know where to go. Maybe that landing page has links on it and tells me Unit 1, like you can clearly do that to guide the students where to go. Like here, for example, it says check where you left off in modules. So we'll go to modules, or I could go there from here, and now I see the assignments and the units that are laid out for me. I'm going to go back to the test course. And now I'm going to go to modules. As a student, I know modules is where I go to see what I need to work on. And I know I need to complete all of these items. So I needed to read this page. I'm going to uncheck it because I'm going to see if this one's going to work for us. So I did uncheck one. Okay, let's see if this release condition works. So I had set, not there, here, modules. I have my introduction. I'm going to look at the first one. I'm not going to mark it as done, but I want to see what's next. Giving me the quiz. I can't remember what the relation with the, they're not working this time either. Sorry about that. It worked yesterday. Yes.
I think with Canvas, don't you have the ability to, like, the menu options on the left there, home, assignments, discussion, modules, it's a lot, I think, sometimes for kids to take in. I think
Yes.
you can customize that and include just what you want for your
Yes.
course on that part.
Just like in the nav bar in Brightspace, you can customize the menu here. You can, there's some degree of customization I think you can do with Schoology too. So if you noticed, if we look back actually, here in Canvas, you notice that from my teacher view, there are some eyes slashed. So those are not visible to the students. I've decided as a teacher, this is all I want them to see. And so like Chris was saying, you can slash out as much as you want there and really keep it streamlined. And then similarly here, we talked about the nav bar, that you can customize that or make it icons. And then let's go back into course and Schoology. Not so much here. Right, so those are going to be standard. And we'll see, let's look at what the student view looks like in Schoology. So in Schoology, when I go into course, you can. I missed that. So yes, you can, again, decide what you want to show, what you don't want to show over there. So that's my bad. And I think we just looked at then with the home page, yeah, so the landing page here, going into a course. Remember that the home page was going straight to materials, so that's where I am. I'm seeing the page that the teacher made. I just haven't signed into my Google Docs here, that's why it's not giving me access. Going into the unit. And then I have to go, I'm going to go through, this was my document that I was working on. If I were logged in, this would be my Google assignment that got named for me. Okay, so I think the biggest differences here is the way the content is presented to the student view content in Brightspace versus the other two platforms, and how different that student view is from the way it looks to the teacher when you're organizing the content. And quickly then, we should also take a look at how you can view as a student when you're in each platform. So I have the option to change my view. I have more options because I'm an administrator, but I'm going to select get the student view. And that looks really, really just like what the student saw, if you recall. Let's put them side by side. I think it's good to know the difference between whether the student view really looks like the student view, the view as student. Did any of you run into trouble with that? And yeah, so here's the teacher, here's the student. So we've got a pretty accurate view. Of course, Maya as a teacher is showing more because I have some limitations on what's released to the students and when the content is released. So that's why as a teacher I'm seeing these others. As a student, they're only seeing the ones that I've released. Yes, Eric?
I know you were talking about content
concerned about STEM editors in PowerSchool, and I know that all three of these have the option for STEM editing. So in that sense, I don't see that there's necessarily an advantage for humanities over science that wants to use STEM. So I don't think I have a preference or would say, Heather, did anything stand out?
I haven't seen that. I think that's where your expertise are gonna come into play. Like, I've never taught a humanities class, so what that looks like, I'm not really sure how that would play out differently. So the more people that can get in the sandbox and kind of get that idea of does it look different,
Yeah.
would be awesome.
And part of it might just be that feel, looking between the way the content is outlined. If you want to have more things showing, then you're going to lean more towards a Brightspace. If you like that folder structure where you can just go through like folders in your file, then you're going to be more on the Schoology side. I was really like units and folders. And then Canvas is kind of in between. You do have to click through things, but it's not so much like a folder, but all three are hierarchical to some extent. Yeah. The other difference might be the immersive sort of nature of going through a unit in Brightspace versus the other two, where Brightspace immerses the student in it more, takes out the distractions. I don't know if that might be a factor. Yeah.
And in regards to the student view, is there a way to select which section? Because we have like 5 sections in Spanish too.
That I have not seen because I don't have sections set up, unfortunately. One big difference that I can bring out when we look here at the Schoology side is that in Schoology, when you go to view as a student, you can go to view as a specific student. You can choose the student view that you want.
That's great. As an advisor, that's really helpful.
That is only in Schoology, not the other two platforms. So that is one difference. But we will also talk about how all three platforms allow you to impersonate students so that you can go in and see pretty much anything if you have the permission. So as an advisor, you would be able to go and see all of your advisees. As a student support team member, you can go to any student, depending on the permission. So that's a huge, huge, huge difference and a huge advantage. But we'll also talk about that. I guess I could just mention now since we're here, that in Schoology, there is also a specific module or setup for advisor dashboards, it's called. So it's kind of a thing that's already built in to say, if I go to my advisor dashboard, my advisees will be sort of programmed in and I'll be able to find my advisees. So that's one advantage. But that's not to say that following your advisees isn't possible in the other two platforms. It is. They just don't have something called this is what you do for your advisor, right? Okay, and there's one more thing I should just mention now since we're here. Schoology also has this thing called workload planning. And this is, only Schoology has this feature, that in your class, when you're about to make an assignment, you can look through, I'm just gonna make this bigger so you can see it. I can go click on workload planning and I can see for each student in my class, what other stuff do they have going on that date or in that week. And I can, move forward, move backwards. But I can see, this week, they already have 3 things done, three things due here and here, so I'm not gonna, double up on the same days. So it's possible to find out that information in the other two platforms by impersonating or by subscribing to, say, a grade level calendar or subscribing to the partner classes in your grade level so that you can see everything on the calendar, what's going on. But it's not slick like this one where you just click it and it's there. So those were a couple things we found about Schoology that really stood out, but then you have to weigh it against sort of the other pieces that you may or may not like about Schoology. Okay, I think that covers all of my, so the last thing I want to talk about was integrations before I continue talking about something else. Teams, okay. So our basic expectations when we look at integrations, we expect integrations with Veracross like we talked about. We're expecting Google Drive and assignments. We're expecting Office 365 OneDrive, which we didn't have in PowerSchool, but we can have now. Any kind of STEM editors, of course, continuing on with embed codes. A lot of us got used to using Teams and like to use Teams. There are integrations here with Teams that are slightly different depending on the platform. I'll go ahead and play this.
So I'm going to play a role. So the case that I'm doing here, I'm going to say anything to do with setting up these integrations and know that I'm just ready to get started with my students. So let's say I log in Monday morning and I want to be able to set up my team, or my class rather, and have an engagement with them. So I'm going to jump into this little widget at the front here, which is called the activity view. So let me just like a user notification system for us. So what we want to do is let the team know that this is where our class session is going to be held today. So I'm going to use our file picker and I'm going to launch the app that is our Teams Community integration. And so taking the Teams Community integration, I'm going to be launching a really simple, create meeting experience. We've all used Teams and we've all seen it probably doesn't mean within the last 24 hours. So I'm going to configure some of those basic meeting information details, get a confirmation, of course, once this works. But of course, we want to fine tune some of those more specific meeting options. And of course, we've all seen this screen many times, so I can just configure some of the details of how this meeting might work. And of course, we join, we present, and all that kind of good stuff. So once I'm good to go, the next step in the pretty sweet spot for our integration here is the response. So if I click insert, I'll actually get that meeting for that team right back in my activity feed. And now if I click post, every learner that logs on to their science quiz this morning is going to find that right on the home page of their course. They're going to know this and where their learning is going to start somewhere.
Okay, so I'm going to pause it there, but so each of the platforms has this integration with creating Teams meetings. So if you like to do that, you can do it all within the LMS. The big difference in the Teams integrations is that in Schoology, that's all you can do is create the team meetings. In Brightspace and in Canvas, they both also integrate beyond the meetings, and you're able to have a team. So when you have your course created in in Canvas and in Brightspace, if you want to, you can also choose to have a team created for that course. So now you've got that same team in Teams with the same students, and then you have the class in Schoology. And so you can go between the two in the app, going from, say, Brightspace website, go into Teams, which you can open in the web browser or you can open in the desktop client. And then you can even use one of the tabs. I don't know if any of you have ever put tabs at the top, kind of like here you can add a website as a tab in your team. You could put your Schoology website in there, or not Schoology, sorry, ignore Schoology, Canvas and Brightspace, so that you have even the LMS sort of within Teams, or you could be in the LMS and send to Teams. So there's this back and forth. So if you wanted to use the channels, for example, in Teams, you can give the link to the group that you've already set up in Brightspace or Canvas, and then they can link and go to that channel, have their chat, do their group work, use the notes, the OneNote notebook that comes with Teams, and then they can still go back into the LMS. So it's kind of the next step beyond just doing the Teams integration. Schoology hasn't gotten there yet.